Students, we have already seen that the cerebral hemispheres are the largest part of the brain, not only of the forebrain but also of the entire brain. Now, these two cerebral hemispheres, one on each side, actually have resulted by the division of the cerebrum by the Sylvian fissa, a division that divides the cerebrum into a left and a right half, left and a right cerebral hemisphere. The entire structure is called cerebrum and it is divided into a left and right half. Now, peculiar it is that the left half controls the right side of the body and the right half controls the left side of the body. However, the two halves are connected internally by a nervous band, a band of nerve fibers that is called corpus callosum, which is a characteristic feature of the mammalian brains. Now, these cerebral hemispheres, each of them, left and right, are divided into four lobes: the frontal lobe in the forehead, the temporal lobe on the sides, the parietal lobe on the top, and the occipital lobe at the base of the brain. Now, the cerebral hemispheres are important that they are the sites of intelligence, memory, consciousness, in fact all the higher centers of the brain, all the higher functions that we ascribe to the brain are located in the cerebral hemispheres. The surface area for that matter, for that purpose, is divided into a number of sulci and gyri projections, up and down projections. The downward projections are called, as you can see in this diagram, the cerebral hemispheres are folded and the downward folds are called sulci and the upward folds are called gyri. The purpose is to greatly increase the surface area of the cerebral hemispheres. The outer part of the cerebral hemisphere that is about 2 to 3 millimeters thick is called the cerebral cortex, and the inner part that lies below the cerebral cortex is the cerebral medulla. The cerebral cortex appears grey in color because of the cell bodies of the neurons. The cell bodies of the neurons are located in this outer part of the cerebral hemisphere. That is why when seen under a microscope it appears grey in color, and below it lies the white matter, the grey matter and white matter. So, grey matter on the above, white matter below. The white matter appears white because of the nerve fibers and the myelin sheaths that are there around them, they are white in color. So, the lower portion appears white in color because of these nerve fibers. Now, the cerebral hemispheres, as I have already said, are the sites where most of the higher centers such as intelligence, memory, thinking are all located in the cerebral hemispheres. Therefore, the cerebral hemisphere contains several primary sensory areas as well as several associated sensory areas. For example, the occipital lobe, that is the lobe of the cerebral hemispheres that is present at the base of the brain, base of the cerebral hemisphere, that is called the occipital lobe, has the primary visual area and the visual association area. Now, what is the function of these two areas? Now, whatever we see with the help of these eyes is conveyed to the primary visual area, where this information that we collect in the form of images as we see them in the eyes, and but interpretation of what we have seen, giving a meaning to it, is the function of the association area. So, the primary sensory area collects this information from the eyes, the association area gives an interpretation, so that we are able to know what is this that we have seen. So, giving a meaning is the function of the association area. Similarly, on the sides we have the temporal lobe. Now, in the temporal lobe there is similarly a primary auditory area and an associated auditory area that is called the Wernicke's area. Wernicke's area. This is the Wernicke's area. Now, primary auditory area collects the information that we hear, but giving an interpretation to what we have heard is the function of the association area that is called the Wernicke's area. Now, this Wernicke's area also is the association area for the speech. Now, speech is a motor function. Lip movements are a motor function, not a sensory function. So, as the lips move, sound is produced, speech is produced. Now, this production of speech is the function of a Broca's area that is located. This is the Broca's area that is located in the frontal lobe. So, the frontal lobe has a Broca's area which is responsible for the production of speech, but understanding speech, comprehension or understanding of the speech is when somebody else speaks, you understand, you comprehend. Now, that is the function. You are not producing any speech, you are not speaking, but you are interpreting what the other person has spoken. So, that is the function. Interpretation of the speech is the function also of the Wernicke's area. Thus, there are several such areas, sensory areas, association areas, and also motor areas like the Broca's area, and all these are all of them, they belong to the higher centers of the brain that are located in the cerebral hemisphere. Now, after this we come to, so these cerebral hemispheres are the largest parts of the whole brain. Second largest parts are the cerebellum at the back of the brain. The hindbrain has a very important part that is called the cerebellum. Now, another feature, another defect that we see these days, that is called the Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease. Now, this Parkinson's disease results from an inherent control. The control is inherent, but uncontrolled motor movements, uncontrolled movements of the body is the characteristic feature of the Parkinson's disease. Now, this Parkinson's disease results from a defect in the basal ganglia. Now, basal ganglia. Now, for such masses of a ganglion is a mass of neurons. So, 5 basal ganglia are located in the white matter below the cerebral cortex in the cerebral hemisphere. So, these basal ganglia which are present in the cerebral medulla actually control the inherent coordinated movement which is affected when we suffer from this Parkinson's disease. The basal ganglia develop defects, as a result of which there is this uncontrolled movement of the one uncontrolled motor movement that is also is known as cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy. So, the movement of the motor movements, movements of the hand, movements of the legs, they are affected greatly by these defects in the basal ganglia that we call the Parkinson's disease or cerebral palsy. Similarly, higher centers, as I already said, are all located in the cerebral hemispheres, and the surface area is greatly increased by these convolutions. The surface is highly convoluted. The downward projections are called sulci. The upward projections are called gyri, and as a result of these sulci and gyri, surface area of the cerebral hemispheres is greatly increased. Next we come to so each cerebral hemisphere, as I already said, is divided into 4 lobes: frontal, then parietal, occipital, and on the sides we have the temporal lobes. Next we come to the ventricles. Ventricles, we have heard of these ventricles in the heart, but in the brain also we talk of these ventricles. What are these ventricles? They are the fluid, because brain is not a solid structure, it is a hollow structure. There are several cavities, fluid filled. The fluid that is filled is the cerebrospinal fluid, and this fluid is contained in the cavities inside the brain that are called ventricles. Now, first of all, in the cerebral hemispheres, in the cerebral hemispheres, the ventricles that are present are called lateral ventricles. Lateral ventricles. Lateral ventricles or paracyle. Now, each paracyle is connected with a ventricle in the diencephalon. Now, this is the third ventricle in the diencephalon, which is also a part of the forebrain. Now, each lateral ventricle is connected with the third ventricle by a foramen of Monro. This is that foramen of Monro. So, one on each side, there is a foramen of Monro joining the lateral ventricle with the third ventricle. Now, the third ventricle is joined with the fourth ventricle. This is the fourth ventricle that is present, fourth ventricle present in the hindbrain, fourth ventricle joined, this is the fourth ventricle, is joined by a narrow duct that is called the aqueduct of Sylvius. Aqueduct of Sylvius, also called ether. Short form is ether. So, aqueduct of Sylvius joins the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. Now, the fourth ventricle is continued posteriorly through the spinal cord as the neural canal. What is the spinal cord? Spinal cord is the posterior continuation of the brain. The brain is located safely in the brain box or the skull, and the vertebral column also inside has the spinal cord. So, this spinal cord is actually the posterior continuation. Brain remains in the skull, the spinal cord remains in the vertebral column, and through the center of the spinal cord runs the neural canal. Now, where from this cerebrospinal fluid come to these ventricles? Now, this cerebrospinal fluid that fills the cavities of the brain, that fills the ventricles of the brain, actually is formed from blood by two choroid plexuses. The one is called the anterior choroid plexus, and another is posterior choroid. So, these anterior and posterior choroid plexuses that ramify the roof of the brain secrete. Plexus means a network. So, it is a network of blood vessels, anterior and posterior, from which the blood is practically filtered, and this filtered cerebrospinal fluid comes to lie in the ventricles. Now, from the fourth ventricle, again these go back to the blood. How? Now, in the fourth ventricle on the roof, there are two pair of apertures, foramen of mesendae. Say this is the foramen of mesendae, and this is the foramen of Lustra. Foramen of mesendae and foramen means a small opening, a small aperture. Foramen of mesendae and foramen of Lustra. Now, with these two small apertures, again the cerebrospinal fluid flows back to the subarachnoid space. Remember the meninges. There are three coverings of the brain that is called the meninges. The innermost is the pia mater. In the middle there is the arachnoid membrane, and this arachnoid membrane encloses a subarachnoid space. So, into this subarachnoid space, this cerebrospinal fluid flows back, and from this subarachnoid space is richly supplied with venous circulation. So, it flows back into the veins. So, that is how the cerebrospinal fluid circulates. Now, sometimes we see people or children or adolescents finding an enlarged brain. That enlargement of the brain is called a hydrocephalus condition. Now, this hydrocephalus condition is because of the excessive accumulation of the cerebrospinal fluid, as a result of which the brain enlarges in size, and this is because of the excess accumulation of this fluid, that is called the cerebrospinal fluid. Now, this fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, is a nutritive fluid. It carries all the nutrition that is required for the brain cells. Then we come to the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system, we have divided the nervous system into, first of all, into two: the central nervous system comprising the brain and the spinal cord. Now, the spinal cord is a narrow structure, If you take a section of that, it appears like this. This is the neural canal through which the cerebrospinal fluid flows, neural canal. This is the transverse section of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a narrow, hollow, tubular structure that passes, which is actually the continuation of the brain, and that passes through the vertebrae of the vertebral column. Now, if you take a section, then you see that it is more or less oval in outline, and inside there is this is the inner H-shaped gray matter, and the outer, this is the white matter. If you compare cerebral hemisphere with the spinal cord, in the cerebral hemisphere, gray matter was outside superficially, that was superficial in position, gray matter, white matter was inside, but here the white matter is outside and the gray matter is inside. The gray matter is produced on the sides into two dorsal horns. This is the dorsal horn and this is the ventral horn. And the gray matter, as we know, contains the neurons. Now, if you so this is a nerve that arises from the spinal cord. We shall talk about it little later. That is called the spinal nerve. So all this, so spinal nerve, this side one, the other side also there will be another. So we have a pair of such nerves, spinal nerves, arising from the spinal cord, and by nature all these spinal nerves are mixed nerves. That means they contain both sensory as well as motor fibers. That's why they are all mixed nerves. So then we come to the peripheral central nervous system and then peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system again is divisible into a somatic nervous system and a visceral nervous system. Somatic nervous system, so peripheral nervous system or PNS for short, is divisible into a somatic nervous system, a somatic nervous system and a visceral nervous system. Visceral nervous system. The somatic nervous system comprises two more divisions or comprises the cranial nerves. Peripheral nervous system is formed by all the nerves that arise from the central system. Central system lies in the skull as well as in the vertebral column, and peripheral nervous system comprises all the nerves that arise from the central system. And coming to somatic nervous system, the somatic nervous system is formed of 12 pair of cranial nerves. 12 pair cranial nerves are those nerves that arise from the brain. Those nerves that arise from the brain are called cranial nerves, and those that arise from the spinal cord, they are called spinal nerves. Spinal nerves. And the spinal nerves are 31 pair. 31 pair. So, cranial nerves 12 pair, spinal nerves 31 pair, together comprise the somatic nervous system. Coming to the visceral nervous system, also known as the autonomic nervous system. Now, this autonomic nervous system or the visceral nervous system is formed of nerves supplying those internal organs which are not under the direct control of the will. For example, the heart, the secretion of digestive enzymes in the alimentary canal, so all these internal organs which are not under the direct control of the will, they are under this visceral nervous system or autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system. Now, this autonomic nervous system has two further divisions. One is called the sympathetic division. Sympathetic division, and the other is the parasympathetic division. Now, before we go to these nerves, first of all, what is a nerve? Let us know what is a nerve. A nerve is actually a bundle of nerve fibers. Bundle of nerve fibers, bundle of nerve fibers that arise from a group of neurons located in the central nervous system. So, each bundle of nerve fibers has an outer covering. Say this is the outer covering, that is called the epineurium. Then inside there is a number of these are the individual nerve fibers. This is the section of a transverse section of a nerve, and these are the nerve fibers, and around each nerve fiber there is a surrounding them there is the epineurium, this is perineurium, and individual fibers, they are surrounded by another covering that is called the endoneurium. So, covered by all these epineurium, perineurium and endoneurium, a nerve is actually a bundle of nerve fibers, one nerve fiber arising from one neuron. So, first of all, let us come to the cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are those nerves that arise from the brain, and these are 12 pair in number, 12 pair in number, and these include the olfactory. Olfactory nerve is a sensory nerve. Its nature is that it is sensory because it arises from the nasal epithelium responsible for picking up the sense of smell. So, the first pair of cranial nerves that are called olfactory nerves are called sensory nerves. Second is optic, olfactory, optic. Optic is also sensory because it arises from the eyes, from the retina of the eyes, carrying information about what we see through the eyes to the brain. So, olfactory, optic. Then third is oculomotor. Third is oculomotor. Oculomotor supplies the muscles that move the eyeball, that allow us to fix the eye, that is called accommodation, eye on a near or a distant object. So, oculomotor, that is a mixed nerve. That means it contains both sensory or afferent. Afferent means sensory and efferent means motor. So, both sensory and motor fibers are contained in the oculomotor nerve. So, it is called a mixed nerve for that purpose. Then we have trochlear. Trochlear is also a mixed nerve. Then trigeminal. Trigeminal also is a mixed nerve. Now, this trigeminal supplies the muscles that move the jaws upper and lower during mastication. Muscles that move the jaws, that bring about mastication of the food, and also information from the gums of the teeth. So, it is both sensory as well as motor. This movement of the muscles, control of the movement of the muscles is a motor function, that is an efferent function, and sensory function, information from the gums is carried by the afferent fibers. So, since it is both afferent and efferent, it is also a mixed nerve. So, it is also mixed. Then we have the abducens. Abducens is also a mixed nerve. Now, this abducens supply again muscles of the eyeball, muscles of the eyeball, both their movement during accommodation and also any information that is to be carried to the brain from these muscles. So, both afferent as well as efferent, afferent as well as efferent. Afferent means towards the brain, afferent. Efferent means away from the brain. So, both afferent and efferent fibers are contained in the abducens also. Then we have what is the facial. Next cranial nerve is called the facial nerve, number 7. So, all these nerves have specified numbers. Number 1 cranial nerve is always olfactory. Optic nerve cannot be number 1. Optic nerve is cranial nerve number 2. Similarly, third means oculomotor, fourth means trochlear. So, each of these cranial nerves is given a particular name as well as a number. So, seventh cranial nerve means always will mean facial. So, facial, that is again a mixed nerve. Mixed or contains both sensory or afferent as well as efferent. Movement of the muscles of the face is a motor function, is an efferent function, whereas any information that is carried from the face to the brain is an afferent function or a sensory function. So, cranial nerve number 7 always will mean the facial nerve. Then eighth nerve is vestibulocochlear nerve. Vestibulocochlear. If you have any idea, the internal ear, this supplies the ear, so it is a sensory nerve. Sensory nerve. And if you have any idea, ear has two functions. Ear has two functions. One is the hearing and the other is maintenance of balance. Maintenance of balance during movement. So, both maintenance of balance is the function of vestibular apparatus and the hearing is the function of an auditory function. So, it is an auditory function. So, since the internal ear is both responsible for hearing as well as the maintenance of balance. So, it is called vestibule is the organ that is there for maintenance of balance, cochlea is for hearing. So, it is both, it is called vestibulocochlear because it is responsible for both maintenance of balance as well as hearing. So, is a sensory nerve. Then ninth is glossopharyngeal. Glossopharyngeal. Ninth is glossopharyngeal. It is again a mixed nerve. Mixed nerve means it carries both sensory as well as motor fibers. 10th is most important, one of the most important cranial nerves, that is called the vagus nerve. You must have heard of this vagus nerve. Now, this vagus nerve is 10th cranial nerve. It is again a mixed nerve that supplies most of the internal, the carries fibers to most of the internal organs. So, vagus. Then 11 is cranial nerve number 11 is spinal accessory. Spinal accessory. Spinal accessory. Spinal accessory moves the neck muscles. The movement of the neck muscles is controlled by this 11th cranial nerve that is called, so, neck muscles, movement of the neck muscles. So, it is an efferent efferent nerve. And the last one, the 12th is cranial nerve number 12 is hypoglossal nerve. Hypoglossal. Now, this hypoglossal nerve supplies the tongue, movement of the tongue as well as information from the tongue. So, it is information of the so hypoglossal is a motor nerve because movement of the tongue that is required during mastication, during swallowing of the food is because of the tongue muscles, and hypoglossal is a motor nerve or efferent nerve because it controls the muscles of the tongue. So, these are the 12 pair of cranial nerves. The number of cranial nerves in mammals is fixed at 12 pair. Then we come to the spinal nerves. Now, there are 31 pair of spinal nerves. Spinal nerves are the nerves that arise from the spinal cord. So, they are called spinal nerves. All spinal nerves, so 31 pair, and all mixed nerves. Mixed means both they contain afferent means sensory as well as efferent means motor fibers in them. So, 31 pairs, and these 31 pairs, out of these there are in the, first of all there is the neck region, the vertebral column or the spinal cord inside the vertebral column is divided into several regions. First of all is the neck region. Now, in the neck region or the cervical region, there are 8 pair of spinal nerves, 8 pair of spinal nerves in the cervical region. Then next is the chest region or the thoracic region. In the thoracic region, there are 12 pair of 12 pair of spinal nerves. Then we have the lumbar region, abdominal region is called the lumbar region. In the lumbar region, there are 5 pair of spinal nerves. Following the lumbar region, we have the sacral region, the waist region, waist, W-A-I-S-T, waist region is called the sacral region. In the sacral region, there are 5 pair of spinal nerves, and then there is one vestigial tail in us also, that is called the coccygeal region. In the coccygeal region, although we do not have a tail, a tail region persists, and that is called the coccygeal region. One pair of nerves supply the coccygeal vertebra, coccygeal region. So, if you add them up, it becomes the totals 31 pair of spinal nerves, and all these spinal nerves are mixed nerves. Then we come to the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system or visceral nervous system, divided into a sympathetic division and a parasympathetic division. Parasympathetic, it has 2 divisions, sympathetic division and a parasympathetic division. Now, all the internal organs which are not under the direct control of our will are under the visceral nervous system. Now, sympathetic nerves arise from the thoracolumbar region. First of all, let us come to the sympathetic division of the autonomic nerves. So, sympathetic division, the nerves arise from thoracolumbar region. That means thorax, and lumbar means the abdominal. So, from the thoracolumbar region, the sympathetic nerves arise. Whereas parasympathetic nerves, as you can see in this diagram, this is the diagram showing the autonomic nervous system. So this is thoracolumbar region, whereas the parasympathetic division arises from the craniosacral region. So cranial refers to the skull or the brain box or the brain. So craniosacral is the last part. So craniosacral region from which the parasympathetic division arises, whereas this sympathetic division, nerves belonging to sympathetic nerves division, they arise from thoracolumbar region. Now, in case of this autonomic nervous system, the peculiarity is that these nerves arise from the craniosacral in case of the sympathetic and craniosacral in case of the parasympathetic and thoracolumbar in case of the but these nerves arises from a group of neurons from these regions, but they must pass through secondary ganglia. There is another set of neurons, another group of neurons located outside the central nervous system. They are called secondary ganglia. That means the primary ganglia are inside the central nervous system, but these nerves must pass through a second group of neurons outside the central nervous system, that is called the secondary ganglia. Now, in case of the sympathetic division, the secondary ganglia, you see, these are the secondary ganglia. The secondary ganglia are located just outside the vertebral column, just outside the central nervous system. So, secondary ganglia in case of the sympathetic division lie in a sympathetic chain. In the sympathetic chain of ganglia just outside, this is that sympathetic chain of ganglia just located just outside the central nervous system. So, in the sympathetic chain. Whereas, in case of the parasympathetic division, the secondary ganglia are located very close to the organ they innervate, very close to or even inside the internal organ that they innervate. So, the secondary ganglia are located very near or inside the organ they innervate. Another distinction is that the sympathetic, in case of the sympathetic division, so imagine now a sympathetic nerve belonging to sympathetic division arises from a group of neurons in the thoracolumbar region, then it passes through a secondary ganglia. Now, in case of the sympathetic division, the secondary ganglia are located just outside the vertebral column. So, in case of the sympathetic nerve or sympathetic division, they have short secondary ganglia are located just outside. So, they have short preganglionic fibers, we are talking of the secondary ganglia. So, they have short preganglionic fibers and long postganglionic fibers. Short preganglionic because the secondary ganglia are located just outside the vertebral column, very close to the central system, very close to the spinal cord. So, the preganglionic are short, but postganglionic they are long. So, long postganglionic fibers. In case of the parasympathetic division, they have long preganglionic and short postganglionic fibers, because they are located very near the organ, the innervate. So, they have long secondary ganglia are located inside or very near. So, they have long preganglionic, but very short postganglionic fibers. Another distinction is that sympathetic nerves secrete, all nerves exercise their action by secreting chemicals from their nerve endings. So, in case of the sympathetic fibers, the chemical that they secrete at their nerve endings is adrenaline like. Adrenaline like. Adrenaline is a hormone that is secreted from the adrenal medulla that increases the heartbeat. So, this substance is adrenaline like chemical at the chemical transmitter at the nerve ending, whereas in case of the parasympathetic, the chemical transmitter that is secreted at the nerve endings is the acetylcholine. Or in other words, these are adrenergic, these are cholinergic. Now, take an example. For example, the heart. You can take any example of the visceral organs. For example, the heart. Now, the heart receives both the fibers from the sympathetic division as well as from the parasympathetic division. But sympathetic fibers have a stimulatory effect, stimulates the heart, whereas parasympathetic nerve inhibits the heartbeat. Another example you can take that of the salivary glands. In case of the salivary glands, the situation is reversed. That means parasympathetic nerves that supply the salivary glands are stimulatory, whereas the sympathetic nerves are inhibitory. That means it is not to say that one particular type of nerve fiber, whether sympathetic or parasympathetic, is always stimulatory or always inhibitory. It may be stimulatory in one, it may be inhibitory in another. So, all internal organs which are not under the direct control of the will are supplied by the nerves, either from the both from the sympathetic as well as from the parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system. କ'ଣ ବନ୍ଦ କରିବା ନା କ'ଣ କରିବା?